I never imagined that an Easter afternoon would end with me sitting in a hospital waiting room, my shirt soaked in wine and a thin line of blood marring my eyebrow, while my thumbs typed 4 words to my lawyer. Phase 1 is complete. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Let's see. My name is James Whitaker. I'm 65, retired from running a small accounting firm for around 30 years. My wife, Ellen, passed away almost 6 years ago after a long illness. Since then, I've been living alone in our 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street in West Vancouver. A house we bought back in 1992 for about $200,000, and that now, for better or worse, is worth nearly $3 million. The neighborhood turned into something I barely recognized. New playgrounds, electric charging stations, and more delivery boxes than paper newspapers. Young families are everywhere. My son, Matthew, is 35 and works in medical sales. He does well, not flashy, but comfortably. His wife, Claire, is a marketing director. They have 2 children, Olivia and Noah, who are 9 and 7. They live a good hour out of town, depending on traffic. I see the grandkids maybe once or twice a month. Holidays are the only real anchor left for me. I always host. Ellen would have wanted me to keep the tradition. That Saturday, I had spent the better part of the morning preparing the roast. A rib roast with rosemary and slow-roasted carrots, Ellen's shortbread tucked into a biscuit tin on the side, and a small basket of chocolate eggs I'd put on the mantel. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasting fat, the kind of smell that stitches memory to now. It felt like holding on to something familiar. They arrived mid-afternoon. I watched Matthew back the family's SUV into the driveway from the kitchen window. Claire was carrying a bottle of wine in a paper bag, the kind of bottle that looks expensive enough to justify a raised brow. Matthew gave me a brief, proper hug when he came in. Polite, practiced. The kids barreled in, breathless and full of chocolate, and that brightened the room in an instant. Olivia shoved a crooked paper crown at me and declared I was the king of Easter. For a moment, I let myself believe it would be an ordinary day. Claire kissed my cheek, smelled like jasmine and something sharp. "James, thank you for having us," she said, placing the bottle on the counter with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is from the Okanagan. Supposed to be very good." She set it down carefully, the label facing outward like a small, ceremonial offering. We settled into the living room before dinner. I'd set the good table in the dining room, but Matthew wanted to catch up first. That was my first tiny warning. He never wants to talk. He's always on a schedule, always scanning his phone. Today he seemed calmer, almost attentive. Claire leaned forward on the armchair like someone about to pitch. "We've been talking about your situation," she began. Her voice was soft but sharp when she hit the important words. I smiled and kept my voice even. "I manage just fine," I said. The smile felt like the right uniform at the time. Dinner that evening began with the kind of polite conversation that hovers like a soap bubble, bright, delicate, and ready to pop with the slightest wrong word. The roast turned out perfectly, though I barely tasted it. Olivia kept slipping her peas to the dog under the table. Noah was narrating some adventure from a video game I couldn't quite follow. I nodded along anyway, happy to hear his voice. I've learned that pretending to understand is the easiest bridge across generations. 3 weeks passed before the next move came. I'd almost started to believe the conversation at Easter would fade away like so many other family proposals, ambitious, sentimental, and quickly forgotten. Then, one morning, I received a thick envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name printed in clean serif letters. Inside was a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. The wording was precise and dry. Notification of estate planning inquiry regarding property title and ownership confirmation. My first reaction was confusion. My second was something sharper, that small electrical pulse behind the ribs that only comes when someone's lying to you. I called Matthew. He answered on the second ring, voice bright and falsely casual. "Hey, Dad, how's the garden? I just got something strange in the mail," I said. "From a firm called Dixon and Hale. It mentions a property title inquiry. You know anything about that?" There was a pause, long enough to make the silence speak for him. "Oh yeah, Claire, and I just wanted to check something about how the will's structured. Nothing serious." Just planning ahead, you know. Planning ahead. The same words I'd used for years while saving for his education, for Ellen's treatments, for the mortgage we nearly lost twice. Planning ahead. Matthew, I said quietly, did you authorize someone to review my estate documents? He exhaled. Dad, it's just look Claire's brother's in real estate. And he said with the market being what it is, it's smart to organize ownership now, so things aren't messy later. You know how probate can be. I'm not dead yet, I said. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavy, dense with things unsaid. That night, I pulled the old safe key from Ellen's jewelry box and opened the metal safe in my study. Inside were the documents no one but she and I had ever seen. The deed, our life insurance papers, and a separate folder marked in my handwriting, Guardian Trust Draft A. I had started that trust 3 years earlier, after Ellen's passing, when the children had grown distant and conversations had turned transactional. My lawyer, an old friend named George Lambert, helped me design it quietly. The trust ensured that the house, upon my passing, would not go directly to Matthew and Claire. Instead, it would fund scholarships for underprivileged students, something Ellen always wanted. Matthew would still receive a separate inheritance, comfortable but not extravagant. It was my quiet rebellion against entitlement, and my final act of love for a world beyond my bloodline. As I read through the clauses, I realized their inquiry could jeopardize everything if they managed to dig deep enough. That night, I called George. He answered on the first ring, groggy but alert when he heard my tone. George, I said, it's time we moved to phase 2. He didn't ask why. He simply said, understood. I looked at Ellen's framed photograph on the desk. She was laughing in that old summer dress, the one she wore when we bought the house. They won't take it, love, I whispered. Not the home, not the promise. The following Sunday, I invited them over again. Same routine, roast, red wine, polite smiles. But this time, I set the stage carefully. The tablecloth was spotless, the silver polished to a mirror. I wanted the place to feel ceremonial, almost sacred. Matthew arrived first, carrying a small bouquet from a gas station, the kind with too much baby's breath and not enough sincerity. Claire followed, wearing that same professional smile, but her eyes darted toward the study door as if she already knew something had shifted. Dad, Matthew said, you didn't have to go to all this trouble again. We just wanted to drop by. Oh, nonsense, I said, pouring wine into each glass. It's good to keep traditions alive. We ate quietly for a while. The children weren't with them this time, which told me they had come with an agenda. Claire set her fork down delicately. James, about that call last week. We didn't mean to upset you. We just thought if we could formalize things, everyone would be more secure. I looked up. Formalize what, exactly? Matthew straightened his back, his voice careful. We were thinking maybe if we transferred the property title now, it would avoid future legal mess. You'd still live here, of course. But technically, it would be in our name. Just paperwork. The calmness in his tone was surgical, premeditated. I could almost see the script written in Claire's neat, corporate handwriting. So, I said slowly, you want to own the house while I'm still in it? Claire smiled faintly. Only for convenience, James. It's just a precaution. Think of it as estate simplification. I took a long sip of wine, letting the silence draw out until it became uncomfortable. Then I said, I appreciate the concern, but the house is already spoken for. Matthew frowned. What does that mean? I looked directly at him. It means your mother and I made arrangements years ago. The house isn't going to you. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the tick of the clock on the mantel. Then Claire's mask slipped, just slightly, the smile thinning into something cold. James, she said softly, that doesn't seem fair. Matthew's your only child. You can't just give away his family home. Family, I repeated. Funny word that. Means different things depending on who's saying it. Matthew's hands clenched on the table. Dad, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just dash. I interrupted. Just what, Matthew? Secure your comfort? Protect your lifestyle? You have a house, 2 cars, a savings plan. You've never missed a meal. Your mother wanted this place to help others. That's what it will do. His eyes hardened in a way I'd never seen before. So that's it then? You'd rather give everything to strangers than your own family. I stood, gathering the dishes with slow precision. Not strangers, I said. Just people who might still remember what gratitude feels like. Claire rose abruptly. We'll talk about this again, she said, her voice low clipped. I'm sure you will, I said. When the door closed behind them, I let out a breath that had been sitting in my chest for years. The mask was off for all of us. In the quiet that followed, I went to my study, opened the laptop, and typed the next entry into my log. Phase 2 executed. The silence after that dinner hung over the house for nearly 2 weeks. No phone calls, no texts, not even the occasional picture of the grandkids that Claire usually sent. I try not to check my phone, but habit is a stubborn thing, the kind of ghost you can't evict. One afternoon, as I was pruning the roses Ellen planted decades ago, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. I recognized the license plate before I recognized the man, a stranger in a navy suit stepping out with a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Mr. Lewis from Dixon and Hale. Mr. Whitaker, he said politely, I was hoping to clarify a few details regarding your estate documents. Purely procedural. I wiped my hands on my jeans. Procedural for whom? He smiled, that tight, diplomatic smile people in suits practice in elevators. For your family, sir. They just want to make sure your wishes are properly reflected in the event of, well, any unforeseen changes. Unforeseen changes. That phrase again. The corporate euphemism for death. I invited him in, poured him a glass of water, and let him talk. He explained how certain preliminary papers had been submitted by my son, pending my acknowledgement. Essentially, they were trying to shift the deed while disguising it as administrative housekeeping. He even had a copy ready for my signature. I read it. Slowly. Every line. My pulse didn't even rise, just a slow burn under the ribs. When I finished, I folded the paper neatly, placed it back on the table, and said, tell them this. If they ever send someone to my door again without asking, the next person they'll talk to will be my attorney. The man stammered, nodded quickly, and left without finishing his water. That night, I sat in my armchair, staring at the framed photograph of Ellen again. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums. I thought about Matthew as a boy, the way he used to help me paint the fence, his small hands sticky with lemonade. I thought about Claire's laughter the first time I met her, genuine and bright before the world hardened her edges. Somewhere along the line, ambition had replaced gratitude. For the first time, I felt something heavier than anger, grief. Not for the house, but for what had eroded between us. I went to my study, opened the Guardian Trust folder again, and reread the clause that left Matthew a fixed sum, enough to ensure comfort, but not indulgence. I hovered over the keyboard for a long time, wondering if I should change it, if I should forgive him one last time. But forgiveness without understanding is just surrender. I saved the file, turned off the light, and whispered, no, Ellen, not yet. The next morning, a single message from Matthew waited on my phone. We need to talk. Please don't do anything drastic. I stared at it for a long while before replying. Come over tomorrow. Noon. And then I deleted the message chain entirely. The following day, sunlight poured through the windows with that deceptive warmth only early spring can manage, bright, gentle, but colder than it looks. I set the kettle to boil, laid out 2 cups, and waited. The air carried a quiet, so heavy it seemed to bend around me. At exactly noon, Matthew's car rolled into the driveway. He came alone this time. No Claire, no children. That was a small mercy. He stood on the porch for a full 10 seconds before knocking, as though he was rehearsing how to start. When I opened the door, he looked older drawn, tired, guilt sitting just beneath the eyes. I gestured toward the kitchen table. Tea. He nodded. We sat in silence for a while, the kettle hissing behind us. Finally, he said, Dad, I shouldn't have sent that man. That was Claire's idea, but I agreed. I thought he stopped, rub his forehead. I thought you'd see it as us trying to help. Help, I repeated, by taking the roof off my head. He flinched. It wasn't supposed to be like that. It's just we've been stretched. Claire's job might be changing. The mortgage has gone up. I panicked. I thought if the house was in our name, it would secure our future. I didn't mean to hurt you. I studied him, this grown man I'd raised, his shoulders bent beneath the same kind of fear I used to feel in my 30s. The fear of losing control, of not being enough. It was almost painful to realize how much of myself he'd inherited, even the worst parts. I stood, retrieved a brown envelope from the cabinet, and set on the table between us. Do you know what this is? He looked uncertain. Your will. Partly, I said. This is the guardian trust your mother and I built. The one you tried to investigate through that firm. I slid it closer. You might as well know the truth. The house will fund scholarships for students from families who can't afford even a single semester. Kids like your mother once was. His face fell. So it's final. Yes. He stared at the papers, jaw tight. Then he said quietly, I don't understand why you'd rather give everything to strangers. I sighed. Because they need it. You have everything you need already, Matthew. You have opportunity. You have a family. Ellen wanted our life to mean something after us, not just for us. He swallowed hard. She would have understood me better than this. No, I said gently. She would have loved you enough to stop you. He didn't reply. Just sat there, breathing slowly, eyes fixed on the envelope as if it might change its mind. Finally, he stood. I can't promise I agree with you, he said. But I get it. That's enough, I said. Understanding is more valuable than agreement. When he left, he didn't slam the door. He just walked down the steps, shoulders heavy but head high. I watched through the window until the car disappeared around the corner, the steam from my untouched tea curling upward like a slow exhale. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel hostile. It felt settled. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Not the brittle silence of resentment, but the kind that lets the house breathe again. The walls, once heavy with tension, seemed lighter somehow. I spent my mornings tending the garden, the same way Ellen used to, pruning, watering, humming tunelessly under my breath. A week later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No law firm's logo this time. Just Matthew's handwriting, careful and unsteady. Inside was a short letter and a folded drawing from Olivia. The drawing showed a big house with flowers, a smiling man with gray hair, and two kids holding balloons. Above it, in crooked letters, she'd written, Grandpa's Garden Forever. The note from Matthew was brief. Dad, I still don't agree with everything, but I'm starting to understand why you did it. Maybe it's time I stopped trying to control what isn't mine to hold. Love him. I must have read that line a dozen times. Something in my chest unclenched. I set the letter on the mantel beside Ellen's photo, next to the tiny porcelain bird she'd bought on our 10th anniversary. The bird had a small chip on its wing, one she'd never bothered to fix. Imperfections make things real, she used to say. That evening, as dusk settled through the window, I poured myself a small glass of sherry and sat in Ellen's old armchair. I looked around the living room, the faded rug, the tick of the clock, the light pooling on the piano she used to play. Everything in that house was a fragment of time, but also a promise kept. I realized then that the real inheritance wasn't in the bricks or the deed. It was in the quiet courage to choose what mattered, even when it hurt. Before heading to bed, I opened my laptop and made one final entry in the log file that had tracked every step of my plan. Phase 3, completion. Outcome, stability achieved. Family dialogue reopened. Ellen's wish honored. Then I closed the file, deleted the folder, and emptied the trash. Some legacies don't need to be digital. A month later, George called to confirm the trust documents were finalized. It's done, James, he said. Scholarships will begin next spring. Thank you, George, I said. Make sure the first one's named after her. He chuckled softly. Already done. After I hung up, I stepped out into the garden. The evening breeze carried the scent of lilacs, the same kind Ellen loved. The neighborhood children were riding their bicycles down the street, their laughter rising and falling like waves. I leaned against the fence, feeling the rough wood under my hand, and thought of Matthew, of how life has a way of teaching the same lesson to every generation, one way or another. In the end, maybe that was the point of it all, to learn when to give, when to hold, and when to let go, without bitterness, without fear. The sun dipped low, painting the house in gold. I whispered, We did it, Ellen. And for the first time in years, I believed her laughter was still somewhere in the air, soft, forgiving, and free. Claire complimented everything. She always does. The tablecloth, the roast, even the way I folded the napkins. So elegant, she said. You always have a way with details. I could hear the gears in that compliment, the preamble to something larger. She glanced at Matthew, who was cutting his meat into precise little squares, his plate a grid of control. After dessert, when the children had migrated to the living room with a movie, Claire poured the wine she'd brought. It was deep and almost violet under the light. She swirled her glass and began softly, James, we've been meaning to talk about your living arrangements. That phrase, living arrangements, was like hearing a lawyer speak at your own birthday. I said nothing, let the silence stretch. Matthew cleared his throat. Dad, the house it's a lot for one person. The maintenance, the bills. We just worry. There it was. The pitch under the politeness. I leaned back and smiled. I'm not exactly climbing roofs or mowing the lawn, son. I hire help when needed. Don't worry. Claire's voice came again, sugar wrapped around glass. It's not just that, James. The property taxes alone are nearly what, 10, maybe 12,000 a year? It's a huge burden. We just think maybe selling could free you up. You'd have flexibility, travel, maybe something smaller, easier. The way she said selling had an echo, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I took a sip of wine. It was good, too good. Matthew added, we were looking into assisted living communities, good ones, really. Near us. You'd still have your space. The kids could visit every day. I watched his lips move and realized that, for the first time, he was talking about me as a piece on a board. Something to relocate. Not a father, but a responsibility to manage. I'll think about it, I said. Claire smiled too quickly. Of course. Just think about it. We only want what's best for you. They left around 8. Away from the porch, the way I always do, until their taillights disappeared. Then I went inside, poured another glass, and opened my laptop. There was a folder on the desktop labeled Phase 1. Inside it, an appraisal letter, a trust draft, and a spreadsheet I'd been refining for nearly 2 years. I clicked on the latest file and updated one cell. Projected equity transfer, delayed. Then I closed the laptop and stared at the dark window, my reflection faint but firm. Good try, kids, I muttered.